The rain poured heavily on the crowded streets of Karachi that evening. Horns blared, lights flickered, and the smell of wet asphalt mixed with roasted corn from the roadside stalls. Arman, a 28-year-old marketing executive, stood under a half-broken bus stop shelter, scrolling his phone impatiently. Arman was sharp-tongued, ambitious, and often too quick to judge people. His Armani watch gleamed under the dim light, and his brows furrowed as raindrops splashed onto his leather shoes. Tonight, he had an important dinner with a foreign client that could change his career. He had been chasing this opportunity for months, and missing this meeting was not an option. When a rusted yellow taxi stopped before him, driven by a frail old man with graying hair and a hunched back, Arman smirked. "Yabi koi gari hai?" "Is this even a car?" he muttered, but with no other option in sight, he yanked the door open and stepped in. The taxi smelled of old leather and faint tobacco. The driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror, his eyes tired but oddly calm. "Where to, Beta?" the old man asked in a low, gentle voice. "Clifton, fast." "Bohat, urgent high." Arman replied, his tone clipped. The old man nodded and the taxi crawled into the heavy traffic. As minutes ticked by, Arman kept tapping his foot, glaring at the speedometer. "Baba, zara te shilange? Can you drive faster?" he snapped. The old man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowed down a bit to avoid a water-filled pothole. "Beta, rat kawakt hai, barish ho rehi hai, zindagi gari sizayata kiamti hai. Sab ko jaldi hai, lekin sab manzil par nahi pohunt." Arman rolled his eyes and chuckled sarcastically. "Bas ya taxi walan ki philosophy suni baki ti." "Great, now I get to hear taxi driver wisdom too." He laughed, loud and dismissive. The old man only smiled faintly and kept driving. But as the rain thickened and the streets glistened under the dim city lights, Arman began noticing things. The old man's hands trembled slightly on the wheel. His eyes were sharp yet sad, like someone carrying a heavy story. There was a faded photograph taped to the dashboard, a young boy in his school uniform, smiling proudly with a medal in his hand. "Wo apka beta hai?" Arman asked casually, partly out of boredom. The old man glanced at the photo, his lips pressed together. "Han, the." Arman frowned. "The MATLAB." The taxi slowed at a signal. The old man didn't look back this time. "Chod kar chala gaya. Bohat arsa ho gaya. Ab surf tasvir bachi hai." A strange heaviness filled the taxi. For a brief second, Arman stopped fidgeting with his phone. He looked at the rain outside, the endless red brake lights, the bustling city that never really cared about anyone's pain. But he quickly shrugged it off. "Sab apni marzi ase jite hain, baba. Apko bi ag barna chahi. Har cheez ka gam nahi kardi." The old man didn't reply. His silence was almost louder than the rain. Suddenly, a black SUV screeched past, splashing muddy water onto the taxi's windshield. The old man swerved slightly, and Arman shouted, "Are! Dek ko kalayan." The driver didn't snap back. Instead, he murmured softly, "Kabi kabi hum samajte hain hum rasta chula rahe hain, asal main rasta humi and chula raha hoda hai." Arman laughed mockingly again. "Wah, kia dialogue mara." Wow, what a line. But deep down, something about the man's calmness bothered him. Why wasn't he reacting? Why did he seem different? As they neared Clifton, the rain turned into a storm. Roads were partially flooded, and traffic became chaotic. The old man took an unexpected turn, a narrow alleyway instead of the main road. "Arai! Ya kia kar rahi hain? Main late ho raha hoon." Arman shouted. The old man's hands tightened on the wheel. "Bacha lina hai na apko? Ya rasti se guzarna zarori hai." Arman's eyes widened. "Kia MATLAB? Kis cheese esi bacha lina hai?" The taxi kept moving slowly through the narrow lane. There were dim lights, shuttered shops, and distant thunder echoing across the city. Suddenly, the old man stopped the car in front of a closed bookshop. "You Torai." Arman stared at him in disbelief. Aap pagal ho gay hain? Main late ho rahahoon. Yakoi jaga hai? The old man turned to him for the first time, his eyes sharp like blades. Aj aap jo sak rati hain, wo kaelyad banjayaga. Zindagi apkoadna biwakt nahi deji jitna aap samajt hain. Before Arman could retort, the old man stepped out into the rain, walked to the shop's side door, and unlocked it with a small rusted key. Arman, now both furious and curious, got out. Baba. Ya sab kia hai? The old man looked at him from the doorway. The storm's wind howled, and a distant siren wailed somewhere in the city. Ya wati jaga hai jahan sab shuro huada. Agar himat hai du andar aye. Arman hesitated. The meeting didn't matter anymore. Something far stranger was unfolding. He took a cautious step toward the doorway. The smell of old paper and rain mixed in the air as he peered inside. There were shelves of dusty books, an old desk, and on the wall, a framed newspaper clipping with a familiar face on it. It was the old taxi driver, younger, standing beside a government official, shaking hands. The headline read, "Local Hero Saves Dozens in 1998 Floods." Arman froze. His mouth went dry. Yeah, AAP? The old man didn't answer. His back was turned, and he was lighting a single lamp in the corner. And then, from the shadows, a phone rang, an old rotary phone that shouldn't even be working in this abandoned place. The old man turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Afay. Apki li ya hai. Arman's hand trembled as he reached toward the ringing phone. Who could possibly be calling here? Why him? The storm raged louder outside. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. He picked up the receiver. Hello? A cold voice whispered on the line, "You shouldn't have laughed at him." Arman's heart stopped. The rain outside turned into a wall of noise, each drop slamming against the windows of the old bookshop. Arman held the dusty phone to his ear, his hand shaking. The whisper echoed again, chilling him to the core, "You shouldn't have laughed at him." His throat went dry. Khan bol raha hai, he whispered, glancing nervously at the old taxi driver who stood silently in the shadows, his face half lit by the flickering lamp. The line crackled, then went dead. A soft click and the dial tone returned, hollow, endless. Arman slammed the receiver down, his heart pounding. What is this place? Who was that? He barked, his voice echoing off the empty shelves. The old man turned slowly, his eyes calm but piercing. Kuch calls waktase banda nahi hote, beta. Kabi wo wahan bi bajte hain jahan salinase bijli nahi. Arman stepped back, confused and angry. Stop with your riddles. I'm late because of you. I don't care about your shop or your ghost calls. Just take me to Clifton. The old man didn't flinch. Apko Clifton nahi janatha. Apko yahan anatha. Arman's fists clenched. What do you mean I had to come here? I booked a taxi, you picked me up, and now you're acting like some saint or prophet? The old man's voice remained calm, almost too calm. Har musafir apni manzil kud nahi chunta. Kabi rasta chunta hai. Before Arman could retort, a loud thud came from the back of the shop. Both turned sharply. Is Jaga main or Kaun high? Arman asked, his voice low now, a thread of fear creeping in. The old man walked slowly toward the back door, his shoes creaking on the damp floorboards. Ya jaga surf merely nahi. Or log bi yad rakti hain. Arman followed despite his better judgment, his phone still in his hand, showing no signal. The back room smelled of rust and wet wood. There was a table with old letters, a broken lantern, and a wooden chest that looked at least 50 years old. The old man kneeled and opened the chest carefully. Inside lay a stack of envelopes, all addressed to different names, all in the same handwriting. What is this? Letters? Arman whispered. The old man picked one, handed it to him. Daki. Arman tore it open. Inside was a letter dated September 12, 1998. It described the flood that had ravaged the city that year, how a school bus was stranded in rising waters, how a man saved the children, one by one, risking his own life while people mocked his broken taxi for blocking the bridge. Armin looked up, stunned. This is you? You were that man? The old man didn't nod, didn't confirm. He simply said, Logo kayo yad nahi reda. Surf hansna reda hai. Armin swallowed hard. For the first time, the arrogance in his voice faded. Baba, why are you showing me this? What does this have to do with me? The old man's eyes darkened. Sab kuch. Kyanke aj rat aap wohi karn whale the jo on lagan nikia the. Armin frowned. What? What did I do? The old man stood up, his frail hands gripping the edge of the table. Aap haste ho, mzak banate ho, samajte ho zindagi surf apni dud hai. Lekan aaj ek or bus hon waliti or aap use dek kuguzerjate. Armin's heart skipped. What bus? What are you talking about? The old man turned toward the door. Kalian. Apko dikata hoon. They stepped out into the storm again. The streets had become small rivers, the neon lights of the city reflecting in dirty water. The old taxi stood waiting, engine still warm. Armin hesitated. Every part of him wanted to walk away, to call another ride, forget this madness, go to his meeting. But something in that phone call, in those letters, in that photo of the boy on the dashboard, held him. He got in the taxi silently. The old man drove without asking this time, turning into darker lanes, where the city's heartbeat slowed and shadows grew taller. Minutes later, they reached an old bridge. A small school bus was stalled in the middle, half its wheels submerged in rising floodwater. Children's silhouettes pressed against the windows, their small hands banging for help. Armin's eyes widened. Oh my God, they're stuck. The old man didn't stop the engine. Abn Hansna the na? Kia Karogiab? Armin stared at him, speechless. Call for help. Police. Rescue. The old man handed him a radio, old and static-filled. Signal nahi milega. Phone nahi kalega. Ya waked apko chun rahahai. Utorai. Armin's hands trembled as he opened the door, rain soaking his expensive suit. The bus door was jammed, the children crying. The floodwater was rising fast. He turned to shout for the old man's help, but the taxi was gone. The street was empty. Only the storm, the trapped children, and the echo of that whisper. You shouldn't have laughed at him. The rain pounded mercilessly, drenching Armin to the bone as he stumbled toward the stranded school bus. The muddy water swirled around his ankles, pulling at his expensive shoes. The children inside were panicking now, their little faces pressed against the fogged glass, their cries muffled by the storm. Hello? Koi hai andar? Armin shouted, banging on the side of the bus. The metal was cold and slippery. A frightened teacher appeared near the door, struggling to force it open. Please. It's jammed. The water is rising, she cried. Armin's mind raced. The old taxi was gone. The streets behind him were empty. Not a single car, not a single person. Only the bridge, the storm, and this moment. Hold on. I'll try from outside, he shouted back. He yanked at the door handle, but it was stuck tight, rusted by the water. The current tugged harder now, his knees sinking into the cold flood. The teacher banged from the inside. The driver went to get help and didn't return. We're stuck with these kids. Armin gritted his teeth, searching for something, a rock, a pole, anything. His phone was dead, useless. The city skyline flickered in the distance, far from this forgotten bridge. He thought of the old man's words, Har musafir apni manzil kud nahi chunta. Kabi kabi rasta chunta hai. And that whisper on the phone, you shouldn't have laughed at him. Was this the moment the old man had dragged him toward? Was this what he was meant to see, or was this some twisted test? Armin took a deep breath, shoved his shoulder against the door, again and again. Pain shot through his arm, but finally, the latch gave a little. Water rushed in, and terrified cries filled the night. Kids! Move back. Teacher, hold them. Armin yelled, prying the door open just enough to pull it wider with a grunt. One by one, small hands reached for him. He grabbed them, lifted the first boy out, then a girl, their wet shoes slipping in his grip. The teacher followed, holding a toddler. The current was stronger now, pushing the bus sideways. The children clung to Armin's coat, their voices trembling, Bia, Humi and Bachalo. Armin looked around. Where do we go? He shouted over the storm. The bridge was cracking in the middle, the road behind was nearly underwater. And then faint headlights appeared through the sheets of rain. The old taxi. It stopped just a few feet away, the engine humming like before, the same calm light in its cabin. The old man stepped out slowly, his silhouette sharp against the storm. Jaldi Caro, he said simply, walking toward the children. His frail frame somehow seemed steady, almost unshakable in the chaos. Together, they led the kids to the taxi, cramming them inside, one after another. It shouldn't have had that much space, but somehow, it did. "Yes, Sab, Kais." Armin whispered, panting, his heart racing. The old man didn't answer. His wet hands gripped the door, his eyes locking onto Armin's. Aaj rat apnhansnacho dia, beta. Ub basek Faisla or Baki High. Armin frowned, breathless. What decision? The old man pointed back at the bus. Ubi bi andar koi high. Armin turned sharply. The teacher was waving frantically, the bus driver was still trapped, his foot pinned under the seat. The water was chest deep now. One wrong step and Armin could be swept away. The old man's voice was calm but firm. Agar aapi bakain jaoj, hosakta hai aapi wapas na aa seko. Lekan agar nahige, ya yad apkos indagi bar soth deji. Armin stared at the dark waters, his breath trembling. His meeting, his future, his reputation, they all seemed so far away now. Why me? He shouted, his voice breaking. Why did you bring me here? The old man's eyes softened, a flicker of something painful behind them. Kayunke jishi eni moody biek dinyahan leatha. Or main behans kamanakardia the ustinis aaj tak main raten ko sodanai. Lightning flashed across the bridge, revealing the old man's face fully scarred, worn, carrying years of untold guilt. Armin's heart pounded in his ears. The water was rising fast. The trapped driver screamed, Bacheo. Koi hai? Bacheo. Armin clenched his fists. This was the moment. He threw off his soaked blazer and waded back toward the sinking bus. The old man watched him go, rain dripping from his gray hair, a faint smile tugging at his lips, the first real smile of the night. The water climbed higher as Armin pushed against the current, each step heavier than the last. The bus leaned slightly, groaning under the force of the flood. Inside, the driver struggled, his face pale, hands clawing at the seat trapping his leg. Hold on. I'm coming. Armin shouted, his voice nearly drowned by the roar of the storm. The children were safe in the old taxi, their small faces pressed to the windows, eyes wide with fear. The teacher clutched them, praying under her breath. The old taxi driver stood by the bridge railing, watching silently, his soaked coat whipping in the wind. Armin reached the bus door, already open and half underwater. He climbed in, his breath coming in gasps. The water inside was icy, swirling around his waist now. Bye, Jaldi Caro. Ya bus pala jayeji, the driver cried. Armin crouched beside him, pulling at the twisted seat. It didn't budge. How's it stuck? My leg. Iron rod niche fans Gaia high. Armin looked around, spotted a loose metal bar near the window. He grabbed it, wedged it under the seat, and pushed with all his strength. His muscles burned, veins in his neck straining. The bus creaked dangerously, water sloshing against the windows. Come on, come on. Armin grunted, teeth clenched. With a loud crack, the seat shifted just enough. The driver screamed in pain but yanked his foot free. Chelo. Nikalte Hain. Armin barked, pulling him up. The two of them fought their way back toward the door, the current now dragging at their knees like invisible hands. Armin shoved the driver ahead. Go! Don't stop! Outside, the old man finally moved, wading in just enough to grab the driver's arm and haul him to safety. Armin followed, his chest heaving, the flood biting at his legs like icy teeth. By the time they reached the taxi, his body was trembling, but the kids cheered weakly from inside. The old man handed Armin a dry shawl from nowhere, as if he had been prepared. Good. Bahut ache. Armin shot him a sharp look, breath ragged. Who are you? How did you know this would happen? The old man didn't answer. He simply turned and looked at the river, where the bus was now half submerged, its lights flickering and dying. Some debts, he said finally, his voice almost a whisper, don't let you sleep. Jab tak wo chukta na ho jayan. Armin stared at him. What debt? You saved them before. Why bring me here? The old man looked at him now, his eyes glinting with something Armin couldn't name. Because once, I didn't. Armin frowned. Didn't what? Didn't stop. Didn't care. Ek musafir ki tera garagaya. Orastin, dujanan chali gayan. The teacher stepped forward, hugging the shivering children, her voice breaking. Thank you, Dano Kashakriya. Agar aap log nahi to. But her words trailed off as she glanced around. Wait, where did you come from? This road is closed. There's no way anyone should have been here. Armin opened his mouth, but stopped. He realized she hadn't seen the taxi arrive. She hadn't even seen the old man until the children were safe. The driver limped toward the edge, staring at the city lights in the distance. Main rescue call car Dita Hoon. Par, he frowned. Maraphone, signal kyan nahi aa raha? None of their phones worked. The bridge, the storm, the silent streets, it felt like they were trapped in a pocket of the city that didn't quite belong to time. The old man finally spoke again. Kalian. Ya rat lambi hai. Or safar abi baki hai. Armin narrowed his eyes. Where now? The old man looked at him with a faint, knowing smile. Wahan, jahan apko samaje ko aap asli main kaun ho. Armin's frustration flared. Enough of your riddles. Tell me straight, who sent that call? Why was it for me? The old man leaned closer, his voice cold and soft. Sab ko o call nahi milta. Sir funko milta hi jo apni hansen kaboj ko nache debe hote hain. Armin's chest tightened. What do you mean, my laughter? Us Hansen ka jo dil ko chupta hai, the old man said, looking straight into his eyes. Jo dusran ko tata hai. Aaj amn bachaya, kal kasiko todoj. Thunder cracked overhead, the bridge trembling. The children whimpered. Armin turned toward the taxi, only to find the doors already open, the warm glow inside beckoning. He hesitated. If I get in, will this end? The old man shook his head slowly. Nahi. Bas Shirohaga. The rain softened to a steady drizzle as the old taxi rumbled back to life. Armin slid into the back seat, drenched and exhausted, his mind racing. The children sat huddled together, their tiny faces pale but calm now, their breaths fogging the cold glass. The teacher held them close, still shivering from the cold floodwater. The rescued driver leaned against the door, silent, his leg wrapped in a torn piece of fabric. The old man sat at the wheel, his hands steady despite the storm. Without a word, he drove forward, not toward the city lights, but deeper into the unfamiliar lanes. Armin leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. Where are you taking us now? Clifton is that way. The main road is behind us. The old man didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, a narrow stretch of cobblestone lined with old buildings Armin didn't recognize. The street signs were rusted, the shops long abandoned. Yeah, main nikabi nahi deka, the teacher whispered, glancing out nervously. Armin's chest tightened. This part of the city doesn't even exist on the map. Baba, what is this? The old man finally spoke, his voice soft yet heavy. Kuch ras surf tab dikte hain jab apko wo dikni chahi. Jabapko kuch yad dalana hoda hai. Arman frowned. Yad dalana? Kiss cheese key? The old man didn't reply. The taxi slowed in front of an old building, its sign barely hanging, letters faded but still readable, Darul Umid Children's Home. The teacher gasped. Yeto das sal peliban hogayatha. Fire lagi ti yahan. Arman looked at her sharply. Fire? Han, she said, her voice trembling. Moody yad hai. Bahut serbak merthe, or kuch lagan pi ilzam laga the kuan hon wakt par matad nahi beji. Arman turned to the old man. Why bring us here? The old man killed the engine, the sudden silence filling the air like a weight. He turned slowly, his eyes locking on Arman's. Kayanke as rat main bi yahan siguzratha. Main hans kodeklia, or chalagaya. The words hung in the cold air. Arman's throat tightened. You were here? You could have saved them? The old man didn't nod, didn't shake his head. He just stepped out of the taxi, his wet shoes sinking slightly into the mud. You torai. The group hesitated, but followed. The children clung to the teacher's sari, whispering in fear. The burned building loomed over them, windows hollow, doors charred, a faint smell of ash still lingering despite the years. Arman's fingers curled into fists. Baba, why are you showing me this? Kayanke aap ways hai hoja rati ho, the old man said quietly. Sab kuch dek kubiyong ban karna, hansna, nikal jana. Arman's jaw tightened. I saved those kids. I risked my life. Don't put me in the same. The old man raised a hand, stopping him. Ek ratka faisla apka sab kuch nahi badalta. Zindagi badalti hai jab aap dekna sikteho, suna sikteho, or hansna ban kardi ho jab jishika dil tut raha ho. The teacher looked between them, confused. What are you two talking about? Why is he saying all this to you? Arman didn't answer. His mind was spinning, the phone call, the bridge, the bus, and now this orphanage that shouldn't even exist on a rainy night. Chaily, the old man said, pushing open the rusted gate. It groaned like something alive. Inside, the courtyard was littered with broken toys, half-burned books, and a rusted swing in the cold wind. The children huddled close, their wide eyes reflecting the weak streetlight. Arman stepped in slowly, his shoes crunching on glass. A sudden chill ran up his spine. He heard something faint, like a whisper, coming from inside the building. Suni yapn, he asked the teacher. She frowned. Kia? The whisper came again, this time clearer, you shouldn't have laughed at him. Arman froze. The same voice. The same words. He turned to the old man, but the old man was already at the door, pushing it open. Wahan jawab milanj, he said softly. Lekin tayarehi. Har jawab may dard hoda hai. Arman swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. The storm outside suddenly felt distant, muted. He stepped into the darkness of the orphanage. The air inside was damp, thick with the smell of smoke and something older, forgotten memories, maybe. The walls were blackened with soot, the ceiling caved in at places. And then, in the faint light from the hallway, he saw it, a wall covered with photographs of smiling children. Some frames were broken, some burned, but one photo caught his eye, a young boy, maybe 8 years old, with the same medal as the one in the old man's taxi. Arman's breath caught. Baba, yeah, wohi baka hai? The old man didn't look at him. His voice cracked for the first time. Han. Mara beta. Arman's heart sank. The room seemed to close in around him. Wobi, iss agmi. The old man finally turned, his eyes shining with a grief that had never healed. Han. Oras rat, jishi ini hans kuguser diatha. Jazibn kl jishi ko ohans kanecha daikayatha. Arman stumbled back a step. What do you mean? Who? The old man didn't answer. Instead, he pointed deeper into the hallway where the whisper had come from. Wahan Jao. Tum Samaj Iega. Arman's shoes scraped against the wet, charred floor as he stepped deeper into the orphanage. The dim corridor stretched ahead like a tunnel of forgotten cries. Each step echoed, carrying with it the scent of burnt wood and old sorrow. Behind him, the children huddled in silence with the teacher, and the rescued driver stayed close to the door, glancing nervously at the street as if hoping to escape this place. The old man followed Armin with slow, steady steps. His presence was like a shadow, always there, always silent, yet heavier than the air itself. "Baba," Armin whispered, his throat dry. "Why does this place feel alive?" The old man didn't reply. His eyes were fixed ahead, on the far end of the hall where a faint flicker of light trembled like a dying candle. The whispers returned, not just one now, but many, layered over each other. Faint, childish voices. "Help us, why didn't they stop? Why did they laugh?" Armin's skin prickled. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," the old man said quietly. "They remember." The corridor led to a room with half-burned curtains and broken chairs scattered across the floor. In the center lay an old notice board, its surface covered with tattered papers. Armin moved closer, his fingers brushing off the soot. There were reports, photographs, even newspaper cuttings. One article headline made his heart skip. "Businessmen ignored pleas for help during fire, dozens dead." The photo beneath it showed a younger man in a black luxury car, his face blurred by motion, but the outline of his jaw, the curve of his smirk, it felt hauntingly familiar. Armin's breath hitched. This can't be." The old man stepped beside him, his voice heavy. "Not you. But someone like you. Rich. Rushed. Busy with his own world." He laughed when a drenched staff member begged for a ride that night. Said, "I don't give lifts." And drove away. Minutes later, this. Armin's stomach twisted. "And you were there?" The old man's hands clenched on his cane. "Yes. I saw it. I drove past too, but unlike him, I told myself I couldn't do anything. My taxi was old. My heart was tired. I had a son waiting at home. I drove on." Armin turned to him sharply. "Your son, the boy in the photo, was here." The words struck like a slap. Armin stumbled back, his voice breaking. "Baba. Why are you showing me this? I wasn't here that night. I didn't." The old man's eyes bored into him. "No. But you live the same way. Busy. Proud. Quick to mock. Slow to stop." Armin wanted to argue, to say he was different, that he had just saved lives tonight. But deep down, he remembered every time he had brushed someone off. The beggar at the signal he laughed at. The office peon he mocked for his torn shoes. The junior colleague he embarrassed in front of the team for being late because of a flooded bus stop. A sudden draft rushed through the corridor, scattering burnt papers. One stuck to Armin's leg. He peeled it off and froze. It was a list, names of the children who had died that night. At the bottom, written in smudged ink, was a name, Ayan. Armin looked at the old man. "That's your son?" The old man nodded once, eyes glistening but firm. "Ayan. 8 years old. Loved books. Wanted to be a pilot." Armin's voice softened. I'm sorry." The old man didn't respond. Instead, he looked at the flickering light at the end of the corridor. "The past does not want your sorry. It wants your change." Suddenly, a door at the far end creaked open on its own. Cold air swept in, carrying with it a faint sound like a child's laugh, but hollow, broken. Armin stepped forward, heart pounding. The old man stayed where he was. "Go," he said. "Some doors only open for those who need to walk through." Armin turned, confusion and fear in his eyes. "What's in there?" "Your truth." The room beyond was small, walls lined with burnt cribs and half-melted toys. In the corner, a cracked mirror leaned against the wall. Its surface was fogged, but as Armin stepped closer, shapes formed, not just his reflection, but something else. He saw himself, not as he was now, but in dozens of fleeting images, laughing at a poor man carrying bricks, rolling his eyes at a crying delivery boy, mocking a cab driver's slow driving, each image layered over the other like ghosts pressing against the glass. His breath quickened. No, that's not. The mirror cracked with a loud snap. Behind him, the old man's voice came again, lower this time. You asked why you. This is why. The city doesn't choose at random. It shows people the face they've hidden from themselves. Armin's legs felt weak. So this night, it's all to punish me? The old man stepped closer, his eyes dark and tired. No, Beta. Not to punish. To give a choice. Every man who walks this road gets one chance: either turn away like I did, or change it for someone else. Outside, the wind howled louder. The children cried out from the taxi, their voices faint but urgent. The old man turned his face to the window, where the rain now glowed faintly golden under a strange light breaking through the clouds. Your night isn't over yet, he said. The call will come again. Armin felt his stomach drop. Call? What call? From who? The old man didn't look at him. From the one who decides if you go back or stay. The night had turned heavier, as if the rain had soaked into the bones of the city itself. Armin stood frozen in the blackened room, staring at the cracked mirror that no longer showed his reflection, only jagged lines that looked like veins of lightning frozen in glass. His fingers twitched, his breath uneven. Behind him, the old taxi driver closed the door slowly, the sound echoing through the hollow corridors like the final note of a warning. It's almost midnight, he murmured. Time doesn't wait in this place. Armin swallowed hard. You said a call would come. What does that mean? Who's calling me? The old man leaned on his cane and stared out of the broken window, rain dripping from the ceiling. It comes for those who are given a chance. But the voice you hear will not always speak kindly. It will test you. Before Armin could reply, his phone, soaked, cracked, and nearly dead, vibrated in his pocket. He stared at it, afraid to touch it. The screen flickered with strange static before a number appeared, no ID. No origin. His thumb hesitated over the answer button. The children in the taxi cried again, their voices blending with the wind. Armin pressed answer. A cold, hollow voice came through, neither male nor female, more like an echo pulled from the walls around him. Armin, you saved lives tonight, but your ledger is not clean. He staggered back, his voice trembling. Who are you? A question asked by every man who thinks he is the center. I am not here to explain. I am here to ask, will you carry what others left behind? I don't understand. Armin whispered harshly. The voice ignored his fear. There is a woman 3 streets away, crying for her son. A driver who left her behind years ago now sleeps without guilt. A man in a suit laughed and drove away. The boy died. You know his name. Armin's heart tightened. Ayan. The voice continued, slower now, the city remembers. Tonight you are given one path. Take the children, leave the ruins, and forget, or walk further into the night and give something back. Armin clenched his fists. What do you want me to do? Decide. The line went dead. The old taxi driver's eyes were already on him. You heard it, didn't you? Armin nodded slowly, his mind spinning. It wants me to go further. But why me? I didn't kill that boy. I didn't. No, the old man said quietly, but you lived as though such cries were never your problem. Tonight, the city made it your problem. Armin felt his chest tighten. The rain outside seemed louder now, the roads emptier. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck 12. He turned to the old man. If I go, will this end? The old man's gaze softened, and for the first time that night, there was no hardness in his voice. Endings are not given, Armin. They are earned. Armin took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The night air slapped his face, cold, wet, carrying the smell of smoke and diesel. The children huddled in the back seat of the taxi, wide-eyed, their little faces pale with fear. He looked at them, then at the old driver.
Take them to the police station. Tell them Arman Malik sent you. Tell them. I'll follow soon. The old man raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? The city is not kind when you walk alone.
Arman forced a faint smile.
Maybe it's time I stop being kind only to myself.
He slammed the taxi door, patted the hood twice, and watched the red tail lights fade into the rain. For the first time in years, he had no car, no driver, no comfort. Just the empty street, the rain, and the echo of a dead boy's name in his mind.
3 streets away, the city waited.
And in the shadows, something moved, a faint silhouette by a lamppost, watching. Arman tightened his coat, his heart beating fast.
Each step forward felt heavier than the last.
The rain blurred the neon lights ahead, but somewhere in that darkness, a woman was crying, and fate was unfolding. The rain had softened into a mist now, but the streets still glistened like sheets of black glass.
Arman walked with his shoulders hunched, his hands shoved deep into his damp pockets, each step echoing between the narrow buildings. The city seemed to hold its breath.
There were no cars passing, no vendors shouting, not even the hum of late-night traffic, only the occasional hiss of water slipping into gutters.
3 streets away, he found the lamp.
Its yellow light trembled against the night, casting a pale circle on the cracked pavement. Underneath it stood a woman in her late 40s, clutching a faded shawl to her chest. Her eyes were red, her face wet not just from rain but from tears that had long stopped asking to be noticed.
She didn't turn when he approached. Are you waiting for someone? Arman asked carefully.
Her shoulders jerked slightly, as though the voice had broken some invisible chain of thought.
Slowly, she turned to face him.
I've been waiting for 10 years, she said, her voice hoarse.
And I don't even know why I still come here.
Arman felt something cold crawl down his spine.
10 years?
She nodded, glancing at a small photograph in her hand, the edges frayed, the image barely visible under the streetlight. It was a boy, smiling shyly, wearing a school bag almost too big for his small shoulders.
Arman swallowed. Is that Ayan? Her grip on the photo tightened. You know his name? Arman hesitated. I was told. Tonight. I came from the orphanage.
For the first time, her expression sharpened, a mix of suspicion and pain.
Orphanage? That place is nothing but ashes now. Why would anyone go there at night?
Arman looked down, his words heavy.
Because it called me.
The woman stared at him as if trying to read the truth in his eyes.
Who are you? Arman Malik. Her face did not soften. That name was in the papers once. I remember. A businessman laughing at the chaos, speeding away. Was that you?
The accusation burned, though he knew it wasn't meant for this version of him. No, he said quietly, but I carry the same sin in different ways.
Her eyes glistened. Then why are you here now? To dig old wounds? To offer charity so you can sleep better?
Arman stepped closer, the rain dripping from his hair onto his collar.
No. I'm here because someone told me I could still make a difference. I don't know how yet.
The woman turned her face away, staring at the puddles gathering at the edge of the street.
Difference?
The difference was 10 years ago when someone could have saved him. Now there's only this, a mother standing where her child never returned.
For a moment, silence stretched between them.
Only the sound of distant thunder rolled through the wet alleys. Then, faintly, Arman heard it again, the whisper. Not from his phone this time, not from the air. From the ground beneath the lamp.
Help her. His heart jumped. Did you hear that? The woman frowned. Hear what?
Arman knelt, brushing the water away from the cracked tiles. There, beneath the lamp's rusted pole, was a small brass plate, nearly hidden under years of grime.
It read. In memory of Ayan, aged 8. Lost in the fire of Block E. Arman's throat tightened. He was found here?
The woman nodded weakly. They brought what was left of him here.
This is where I last saw the ambulance.
Arman stood, his fists clenched. Something inside him shifted anger, regret, and a fierce, rising will to not let this night fade into another scar on someone's life.
He looked at her again. Tell me what you need most tonight. Not for the past. For now. Her lips trembled. Justice. Not money. Not pity. Just someone to remember what happened and not walk away. Armin took a deep breath. Then I won't. As if on cue, his phone buzzed again. This time the screen glowed faintly white, though the battery had been dead minutes ago. A message appeared. One more door waits. Find it, and you may return. The woman noticed the glow on his face. What is it? Armin slipped the phone back into his pocket. A door, he said softly, almost to himself. Always another door. The rain began to fall harder again, streaking down their faces. Somewhere behind them, the old taxi's headlights flashed briefly at the far end of the lane, like a ghost still keeping watch. Armin turned to the woman. Will you walk with me? She looked at the dark streets ahead and hesitated. I've walked alone for 10 years. Tonight, maybe I can walk a little more. And together, they stepped out of the circle of yellow light, into the waiting night that was far from done with them. The city was darker now, as if the street lamps themselves were holding their glow back in fear. Armin and the grieving mother, Nassima, walked side by side through the narrow lanes. The rain drummed against the rusted rooftops, turning gutters into thin rivers. Her shawl clung to her shoulders, her lips pressed tight against the chill. Armin glanced at her every few steps. She carried herself like someone who had walked this path too many times before, not searching, just remembering. You said you've been coming here for 10 years, he murmured. Every night? Nassima shook her head. Every year, on this date. I wait. I speak to him, even though no one listens. Armin's jaw tightened. Someone listened tonight. She looked at him then, her eyes narrowing in a way that made him uneasy. Yes. But why you? The question hung heavy between them. Armin had no answer. The rain filled the silence for them. As they turned another corner, a sound rose over the patter of rain, a faint hum, like old machinery. At the far end of the street, a door stood ajar. It was an ordinary metal shutter, the kind used by closed repair shops, but a soft white glow leaked out from its edges. Armin stopped in his tracks. That's it. Nassima followed his gaze. How do you know? He took a deep breath. Because I've been following signs all night. And every one of them leads to a door like this. As they approached, the glow brightened, painting the wet ground in ghostly silver. Armin placed his hand on the cold metal. It felt strangely warm beneath the rain. Nassima clutched her shawl tighter. What's behind it? Armin shook his head. Only one way to find out. He pushed it open. The inside was nothing like the street outside. Warm air rolled out, scented faintly with old paper and candle wax. Shelves lined the walls, filled with files, photographs, and small belongings, children's drawings, shoes, half-melted toys, notebooks with charred edges. It was like a lost and found for forgotten lives. Nassima stepped in slowly, her fingers trembling as they brushed the nearest shelf. These are from the fire. Armin's eyes swept the room. At the far wall, a desk stood under a flickering bulb. On it lay a thick ledger, open to a page marked with a single name written in bold. Armin Malik. His breath caught. This is my name. Nassima looked at him sharply. Then this was meant for you. He moved closer. Under his name were not crimes, but moments, dates, times, brief notes. Laughed at driver, July 2015. Ignored mother with sick child, November 2017. Refused lift during storm, May 2019. Each line felt like a nail hammered into his chest. How do they know all this? Before Nassima could answer, a voice spoke from the shadows behind the desk. Because we watch Armin. A man stepped forward, tall, well-dressed, with a face that looked painfully familiar. Not because Armin knew him personally,
but because he had seen that smirk before, years ago, on the front page of a paper. It was the businessman who had driven away during the fire.
You, Armin whispered.
The man smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. I thought I escaped this place.
For 10 years, I walked free. Rich, untouchable. But every year, this night pulls me back. And now, it's your turn. Nasima's breath caught.
You were the one who left my son to die.
The man's expression flickered a shadow of guilt, quickly masked by arrogance. I was late for a meeting.
I didn't know the fire would spread that fast.
Armin stepped forward, anger rising in his chest. And you lived like nothing happened?
I lived as the world taught me, the man said coolly.
Money moves forward. Grief stays behind. The words made Nasima tremble with rage. You will not leave this place tonight.
The man looked at her, then at Armin, and chuckled.
That's the beauty of it. Neither will you, unless you take my place. Armin froze. What do you mean?
The man stepped closer, the glow of the room painting his face pale.
This city doesn't just want justice. It wants a bearer, someone to carry the weight, someone to answer the cries.
For 10 years, I bore it, half awake, half cursed.
Now it's looking for a new name in the book.
His finger pointed at Armin's name in the ledger.
Nasima gasped. No, you can't, he came to help.
The man smiled darkly.
Help or not, he is here. That's enough for the city. Armin's heart pounded.
The shelves seemed to groan, the bulb flickered wildly, and somewhere outside, the rain stopped, leaving behind a silence that felt like judgment waiting to fall.
The silence pressed down on the room like a heavy cloak.
The rain outside had ceased entirely, leaving only the drip of water from rooftops and the faint hum of the flickering bulb above the ledger. Armin stood frozen, staring at his own name written in dark ink, each word beneath it like a blade, dates, moments, tiny betrayals he had long forgotten, but this place hadn't. Nasima stood beside him, clutching her shawl so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes darted between the ledger and the man from the past, the businessman with the cold, polished shoes that didn't seem to get wet, even in the rain. You're lying, Armin said finally, his voice rough, his chest rising and falling.
This city, this curse, whatever it is, it chose you because you ran. You left that boy. I didn't. The man's smirk deepened. Guilt is not always about action, Mr. Malik.
Sometimes it's about absence, the hundreds of times you turned away. The nights you drove past, the hands you waved off, the words you used to make yourself feel above the rest.
It adds up. Nasima's voice cracked through the tension. Then why should he suffer? Why not you, again? Why not carry what you started?
The man's expression flickered with something darker. Because I have already given my 10 years. I have lived with whispers in my walls, shadows in my mirrors. My wealth turns sour, my nights cold.
And now, this ledger seeks new ink. Armin's fists tightened.
You want me to take your place, to bear the cries, the guilt, the punishment for what you did? The man tilted his head.
Not for what I did. For what the world does, and men like you let happen.
The bulb above them buzzed violently, casting sharp, broken shadows across the floor. The shelves rattled, a faint moan slipping from the room itself. It felt alive now, restless.
Nasima stepped in front of Armin, her small frame trembling but unyielding.
If this place wants a sacrifice, let it take the guilty, not the willing. The man laughed softly.
You think this city is fair? No, madam. It is only hungry. Armin's phone vibrated again, a cold, sharp pulse in his pocket. He pulled it out.
The screen was cracked, the battery still impossibly alive.
One line appeared. Choice must be made before dawn.
He looked at the clock on the wall, an old, cracked face with its hands frozen at 3:15, but the second hand twitched erratically, like it was trying to move.
Armin turned to Nasima. If I walk away now, will this stop following me? The businessman answered before she could. Yes.
You'll go home, wake up, sign another contract, laugh at another man's misfortune, forget all this.
The city will find someone else. And the children? The mother? The memories? Armin asked.
They'll stay, the man said coldly.
They always stay. Nasima's voice dropped to a whisper. And if you take it? The man's eyes glinted. Then you carry it.
The weight, the screams, the nights that don't end.
You become the one who stops next time. The one who sees.
Armin's heart pounded in his chest. He remembered the faces of the children in the taxi, the way they looked at him as though waiting for something more than a ride. He remembered the mirror in the orphanage, the reflection of every small cruelty he had brushed off as nothing. He remembered the mother in front of him, 10 years of waiting in the rain for a boy who never came home. And for the first time, the businessman's smirk seemed to falter as if he too was waiting for the answer. Armin stepped closer to the ledger.
The ink on his name shimmered faintly, as if alive, waiting to claim him. His voice came out low. If I sign, does he walk free? The man nodded slowly. Yes. I will be gone. The city will release me. Armin's jaw tightened. Then you get to live. Again. And I carry what you left behind.
That, the man said softly, is how the city breathes.
Nasima gripped Armin's sleeve. Don't do it.
You don't deserve his chains. Armin looked at her, his eyes heavy.
No one ever thinks they do. Until the night comes.
The bulb flared once bright enough to blind, then dimmed, leaving only the ledger glowing faintly like an open wound in the dark.
Armin reached for the pen.
The pen was cold. Too cold. As Armin's fingers wrapped around it, the metal felt more like ice than steel, and for a moment he wondered if it was even meant to be touched by the living. The ledger before him pulsed faintly, each line shimmering as though the words were carved from embers waiting to flare. Nasima's grip on his sleeve tightened. Armin, once you write, you can't erase it. You'll carry their screams, their nights, their silence. He swallowed, his throat dry. The businessman on the other side of the desk leaned back slightly, his smirk returning like a man who had just watched the chains on his ankles loosen. He's already made his choice, he whispered. Armin's heart thundered in his chest. He thought of the children he had sent away in the taxi, their tiny faces pressed against the window, watching him vanish into the storm. He thought of his past, all those moments he had dismissed as just business. The times he had told himself, it's not my job to care. And then, he thought of Ayan. 8 years old. A name carved on a brass plate under a lonely lamp. He pressed the pen to the page. The ink bled instantly, spreading like veins of black fire, crawling up the letters of his name. It didn't just write, it bit. Pain shot through his fingertips, searing his palm, crawling up his wrist like something alive. Nasima gasped. Armin! Stop! But the ledger was no longer just a book. It was a mouth, and it had tasted blood. The bulb overhead shattered with a sharp crack, plunging the room into a glow that came only from the ink itself. The businessman staggered back, covering his eyes, his polished shoes scraping against the floor. No, it's too fast, he muttered. The shelves shook violently. Toys fell. Papers scattered. The drawings of lost children lifted in the air as if caught by a wind that had no source. And in the chaos, the door slammed shut. Armin's hand burned hotter, his knees buckling. What's happening? The voice came again, the same cold, hollow voice that had called him before, but now it filled the room like 100 echoes at once. The bearer is chosen. Nasima knelt beside him, trying to pull the pen away, but it wouldn't leave his grip. His fingers were locked, veins glowing faintly beneath the skin. The businessman stumbled toward the door, but it refused to open. He slammed his fists against it. You promised, he shouted. I gave him willingly. The voice replied, calm and cruel, willingness is not enough. Truth decides. The businessman froze, his smirk cracking into horror. What do you mean? The ledger's glow spread wider, illuminating the room in a cold white blaze. Armin gasped, his vision blurring, but in that blur, he saw something, children, dozens of them, standing in the shelves, in the corners, their silhouettes faint and smoky, their eyes calm.
One of them stepped forward. A boy with a school bag. Ayan.
He looked not at the businessman, but at Armin. "Will you stop the next one?" the boy asked, his voice soft but echoing.
Armin's lips trembled. "Yes. I will."
The boy nodded once, then placed his tiny, cold hand over Armin's burning wrist. The pain vanished. The ledger closed with a loud snap.
The glow faded.
The children's shapes dissolved like mist.
Armin collapsed to his knees, gasping for air.
When he looked up, the businessman was gone. Only his polished shoes remained, turned upside down near the door, empty.
Nasima stared at the empty space where he had stood. Where did he go? Armin wiped the rain and sweat from his face.
His voice was hoarse. Where he belonged.
The door creaked open on its own now. Outside, the city was quiet again. No rain. Just the wet smell of streets waiting for dawn. Armin stood slowly. Something inside him felt different, heavier, yet clearer.
The pen was gone from his hand. But in its place, a faint black mark circled his wrist like a scar.
Nasima touched his arm gently. "What did you do?"
Armin looked at her, eyes dark but steady.
"I didn't save him. But I will save the next." Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed faint and far away. The city was waking up.
The morning sky was a dull gray, the kind of color that made the city feel tired before the day had even begun. The streets glistened with leftover rain, and the smell of wet asphalt clung to the air. Armin stepped out from the shop's doorway, his hand instinctively brushing over the black mark that now circled his wrist. It was cold to the touch, not painful, but alive.
It pulsed faintly with his heartbeat.
Nasima followed a few steps behind him, clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders.
Neither spoke for several minutes. They just walked, their shoes leaving dark prints on the wet pavement. Finally, she asked, "Do you feel it? Like it's still there?" Armin didn't look at her.
His eyes stayed forward, scanning the empty streets as if expecting something to emerge from the mist.
"Yes," he said simply. "It's not just a scar. It's watching me."
A rickshaw passed by, its driver half asleep, a cigarette dangling from his lips. The city was starting to stir, unaware of what had happened just hours before.
Nasima glanced at him nervously. "You could still walk away, you know. Forget it all. Throw the night into the river and pretend it never came." Armin gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I've been pretending my whole life. Look where that got me."
They stopped at a roadside tea stall. The owner was still sweeping the floor, muttering to himself, his old radio crackling with early morning news about rising prices and broken promises.
Armin ordered 2 cups of tea.
As he waited, his eyes drifted to a bulletin board nearby, missing children posters, faded and curling at the edges, some so old their colors had bled into the paper.
Ayan's face wasn't there. But it could have been.
He reached out, his fingers grazing the edge of one poster, a girl with pigtails, vanished 3 years ago.
The black mark on his wrist pulsed once, faint but firm. "Armin?" Nasima's voice was cautious now. "What is it?"
He turned to her, his eyes darker than the night before.
"It's telling me something." She frowned. "What do you mean?"
"The boy," he said quietly.
"Ayan. He asked if I'd stop the next one. Maybe this is how it starts."
Before Nasima could reply, a commotion broke out further down the street.
A man shouting. A small crowd gathering.
Armin turned his head sharply. A woman, her clothes torn, was crying beside a fruit cart, clutching a thin boy by the wrist.
The boy couldn't have been older than 9. The cart owner was yelling at them, waving a stick. "Thieves! I caught him stealing. Look at him, empty pockets, dirty hands. Call the police."
The boy's eyes were wide, terrified. He shook his head furiously.
"I wasn't stealing. I swear. I was just hungry." People murmured. Some laughed.
Some pulled out their phones to record. Armin's mark burned again, not painful this time, but insistent, as if urging him. He stepped forward.
"Wait," Nasima said, catching his sleeve. "Don't get involved. This isn't your."
"It is now," he interrupted.
The crowd parted slightly as he approached. The cart owner glared at him. "What? You want to defend a thief?
These kids, they learn early, lie, cheat, beg." "Let him go," Armin said calmly.
The man snorted. "Are you his father?" "No." "Then stay out of it."
The black mark seared suddenly, a sharp jolt that made Armin's fingers twitch.
He clenched his fist.
His voice grew cold.
"I said let him go."
There was something in his tone, not loud, not violent, but final. The cart owner hesitated, his stick lowering. The woman holding the boy released him slowly, muttering about curses. The boy stepped back, his eyes still wide, staring at Armin. There was something familiar in that stare, the same hollow hunger he had seen in Ayan's eyes the night before.
"What's your name?" Armin asked.
"Samir," the boy whispered.
"Where's your home?"
The boy looked down at his bare feet.
"Nowhere." Armin exhaled slowly.
He didn't know why, but the words came out on their own.
"Come with me." The crowd murmured louder now.
Nasima stared at him like he had just invited trouble to dinner. "Armin," she whispered harshly, "you can't take every broken child off the street."
"I'm not," he said. "I'm starting with one." Samir followed quietly, clutching the edge of Armin's coat as they walked away.
The crowd lost interest quickly. The tea stall owner went back to sweeping. But as they turned the corner, Armin heard a faint sound behind them, a rustle, a scrape, something dragging across the pavement.
He glanced over his shoulder.
A piece of paper was fluttering across the wet street, carried by no wind. It was a missing child poster. And this time, the face on it was Samir's. Dated 3 days ago.
Armin's blood ran cold.
He grabbed the paper. The mark on his wrist throbbed again.
The boy looked up innocently. "What is it?"
Armin stared at him, then at the paper, then at the empty street. "Nothing," he said finally, folding it and sliding it into his pocket.
"Not yet."
The city had fully awakened now, buses choking the roads with smoke, shop shutters rattling open, schoolchildren dragging bags heavier than their shoulders. Yet for Armin, everything felt unnervingly quiet. Samir walked beside him, his small steps quick to match Armin's longer stride, while Nasima followed close, her eyes scanning the streets as if shadows had grown teeth overnight. They turned into a narrow alley near the old railway line, where the walls were painted with faded advertisements and graffiti that no one ever bothered to erase. The smell of damp brick and rust lingered in the air. Armin stopped, knelt to Samir's level, and held out the folded poster he had found.
"Is this you?" he asked gently.
Samir blinked.
"Yes, that's me."
His voice carried no surprise, just a tired acceptance.
"That's my picture from school."
Armin studied the boy's face, the same tired eyes, the same thin cheeks.
"Who put this up? Your parents?"
Samir shook his head slowly.
"I don't know. My parents left me a long time ago.
I lived with my uncle, but he sent me out to beg when there was no money.
One day I didn't go back."
The black mark on Armin's wrist gave a faint pulse, not painful this time, more like a heartbeat of warning.
Nasima crossed her arms. "This city swallows children, Armin. You can't fix it with pity." He didn't answer her.
His eyes were on the far end of the alley. There, just for a moment, he saw it, a figure.
Not moving. Not walking. Just standing.
A man in a long dark coat, his face hidden beneath the brim of a cap.
Too still to be a passerby, too silent to be a neighbor. Armin's breath caught.
The mark burned faintly, as though it, too, had seen the figure. Then the man turned and disappeared behind the corner.
Armin stood at once.
"Stay here," he told Nasima and Samir, and before they could protest, he walked briskly toward the end of the alley.
The corner was empty. Only an old iron gate hung loose, swaying slightly though there was no breeze. He stepped out, eyes scanning the street. A rickshaw honked somewhere far away. A stray dog sniffed a garbage bin. Nothing else. But then, he spotted it. On the wall beside the gate, another poster. Fresh. The paper still crisp. Samir's face again.
And beneath it, in thick black ink, a line written in Urdu, found or taken, both feed the debt.
Armin's jaw tightened.
The handwriting was the same as the ledger.
He tore the poster down.
Behind him, a whisper crawled along the bricks. Not a voice, a scrape, like chalk dragged over stone. He spun, but the alley was empty.
Nasima called from behind, "Armin. What is it?" He didn't answer.
He simply folded the poster, shoved it into his coat, and walked back to them. Samir looked up at him with frightened eyes.
"Is someone looking for me?"
"Yes," Armin said grimly, "but not the kind you want finding you." They left the alley quickly, moving through the waking city. Armin couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, reflections in shop windows, shadows that seemed a second too slow to fade, the mark on his wrist burning faintly like a compass needle that had finally found north. By the time they reached the bus stand, Nasima grabbed his arm.
"Armin, this isn't just about helping a hungry boy. This is something darker. That night, that book, it didn't end, did it?"
He looked at her with hollow eyes.
"No. It started."
A bus screeched to a halt.
Passengers spilled out.
Among them, Armin noticed a woman, finely dressed, her eyes sharp as glass. She scanned the crowd with purpose, a folded poster clutched in her hand.
Samir shrank behind Armin instinctively.
The woman's gaze landed on them for half a second too long.
Armin's mark seared again.
"She's one of them," he whispered. The woman began to walk toward them.
Armin grabbed Samir's hand. "Run." They pushed into the crowd, weaving through vendors and commuters, while behind them the woman's heels clicked against the wet pavement, steady, relentless. Nasima hissed, "Where are we going?" "Anywhere she can't follow."
But deep inside, he already knew, there was no running from something that walked between the living and the ledger. The crowd at the bus stand thickened, a restless sea of early workers, impatient students, and vendors balancing steaming kettles of tea.
Armin pushed through, Samir's small hand locked in his grip, Nasima close behind.
But no matter how many turns they took, the sound of her heels, deliberate, echoing, followed. They slipped into a narrow lane behind the market. Crates of vegetables lined the walls, the air sharp with the smell of coriander and damp cardboard. Armin stopped, pressing Samir against the wall gently. "Stay quiet," he whispered. The lane was silent for a moment. Then, the clicking of heels stopped just around the corner. She appeared. Tall, poised, her dark hair tied neatly, a folder clutched under one arm and a single poster in her hand. Her eyes, sharp and unblinking, locked onto Armin like a hawk that had finally spotted its prey. "Mr. Armin Khan," she said softly, her voice calm but carrying. "You're harder to find than I expected."
Nasima stepped forward defensively. "Who are you?"
The woman smiled faintly.
"Someone who keeps promises."
Armin's wrist throbbed.
The black mark grew cold, not hot, like ice tightening around his veins.
He kept his tone steady.
"What do you want?"
She held up the poster.
Samir's face stared back at them from the paper.
"This boy," she said. "He's part of an arrangement that must be honored." Samir whimpered, clutching Armin's coat tighter. Armin stepped forward, blocking him from her view.
"Arrangement with who?"
"His parents left him.
He's nobody's to take."
The woman tilted her head.
"That's where you're wrong. They promised a name.
And when a name is given, it becomes part of the ledger."
Nasima's breath caught.
"The ledger, you're with him."
The woman didn't flinch.
"I work for what is owed."
"The man you met was only a collector. I am a keeper."
Armin felt the alley closing in around them, the air heavier.
He remembered the businessman's smirk, the cold voice, the burning pen.
Now, this woman stood where he had left that nightmare behind, as if the city itself was folding the darkness into his path.
He clenched his fist. I signed my name in that book. I didn't sign his.
The woman's smile sharpened, almost pitying.
You don't understand yet. Signing your name doesn't free others. It binds you to the debt.
Every child you shield becomes part of your weight.
She stepped closer, the heels clicking softly now like a metronome marking a countdown.
Hand him over, Mr. Khan. I'll make sure your nights stay quiet.
No more whispers. No more burning Mark.
Armin stared at her, the rain-soaked morning painting her in a dull glow. Samir tugged his coat.
Don't leave me, the boy whispered. He didn't answer the boy. Not yet.
He stared at the woman.
What happens if I say no? He asked.
Her eyes darkened, and for a brief second, her voice was not just hers, it was layered, like 1,000 murmurs beneath one tongue.
Then the city will start to remember you.
A sudden gust rushed through the lane, scattering the vegetable crates, knocking a signboard loose. People at the far end turned briefly, then hurried away, unwilling to notice too much.
Armin stepped closer until only a foot of space remained between them.
His voice dropped to a growl.
You already took one child. Not this one. The woman's expression didn't falter.
But she did something unexpected, she placed the folded poster into his hand. Then carry him, she said. But remember, every step you take with him is a step against the tide.
And tides always return.
She turned on her heel and walked away, her figure fading into the thickening crowd as if she had never been there.
Armin looked at the poster.
Samir's face again, but the date had changed.
Today's date. Nasima whispered, what did she mean, tides return?
Armin folded the poster slowly, his jaw set.
It means they're not done with me. Or him.
Samir clung to him, trembling. And somewhere, far away, a bell tolled, not from a mosque, not from a temple, but a deep metallic clang that only Armin seemed to hear. His mark pulsed with it, once, twice, then faded.
The city looked normal again.
But the hunt had only paused. The city sun had climbed higher, washing the streets in a dull, pale heat. Armin kept his head low, his coat pulled tight, the folded poster pressing against his chest like a silent threat. Samir walked beside him, one hand clinging to his sleeve, while Nasima stayed close, her sharp eyes scanning every face that passed them.
They needed shelter. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere the woman with the folded poster wouldn't think to look. Where are we going? Nasima whispered.
Armin didn't slow his pace.
An old friend runs a repair shop near the canal. He doesn't ask questions.
They wove through back streets until the noise of the main road faded. The shop was small, hidden behind rusted shutters and a broken neon sign that still flickered the word repairs in half-dead light.
Armin knocked twice.
The door opened just enough for a single wary eye to appear.
Armin Khan?
The voice was rough, surprised.
Haven't seen you in years.
The door swung open. A broad-shouldered man with grease on his hands and a limp in his leg stepped aside.
Come in before someone sees.
His name was Rafi, a mechanic who owed Armin a favor from a long time ago. The shop smelled of oil and dust, old radios stacked beside broken fans, the hum of a single ceiling fan doing little to cool the air.
Rafi looked at Samir curiously. Your son?
No, Armin said shortly.
Just someone who needs a place. Rafi raised an eyebrow but didn't ask more.
He led them to the back room, a cramped space with 2 old chairs and a dusty window overlooking the canal. You can stay a few hours, Rafi said.
After that, questions start. Nasima sat down heavily, rubbing her temples.
A few hours is better than nothing.
Samir stood by the window, his fingers tracing the dusty glass.
The city moved sluggishly outside, rickshaws clattering, children running barefoot along the canal edge. But his face was pale, his eyes distant. Armin knelt beside him.
Samir, he said gently, that night, before I found you, where were you? The boy's fingers stilled on the glass. I was in a house, he whispered. A big one. Cold. They told me to wait. Who told you?
Samir shook his head, as if afraid to remember.
A man and a lady. They said I would go somewhere better. They said I just had to sign my name. Armin's stomach tightened. Did you sign? The boy hesitated. I tried. But the pen, it didn't work. Then everything went dark.
The mark on Armin's wrist burned faintly, as though reacting to the memory.
Nassima frowned. This is the same game they played with Ayan, isn't it? The same trap. Armin nodded slowly. But this time, they're moving faster. He turned to Rafi. Do you have an old phone? One without a SIM?
Rafi disappeared into the front and returned with a cracked keypad phone. Here.
Why?
I need to make calls they can't trace, Armin said, though he wasn't sure who they really were. He dialed a number, an old contact in the city's missing persons bureau.
It rang twice, then cut off. No voice. Just a faint hiss, like static. Armin frowned, tried again. The same result.
The third time, a whisper came through, not a voice he knew, not even human in tone.
Just 3 words. You are marked. The line went dead.
The lights in the shop flickered.
Rafi swore under his breath. Power's been stable all day.
Armin pocketed the phone slowly. The air in the room had shifted, heavier, tighter. Samir moved away from the window now, his face pale.
I don't like it here. Nassima stood abruptly. Armin, we can't hide. They know.
Before Armin could reply, a knock rattled the front shutters, 3 sharp knocks, too precise to be random.
Rafi froze. That's not a customer. Armin's mark burned.
He moved Samir behind him and whispered, back door.
Now.
But as they turned, the back door swung open on its own, no wind, no sound of hinges, just a cold rush of air that smelled like wet ink.
Samir whimpered. They found us. Armin clenched his fists.
Then we stop running. He stepped forward, the mark on his wrist glowing faintly beneath his sleeve, as a shadow stretched across the workshop floor, long, thin, and slowly crawling toward them. The workshop air turned heavy, thick with the smell of oil and damp metal. Every loose screw, every dangling wire seemed to vibrate as the shadow stretched across the floor like black smoke crawling on its belly. Samir clung to Armin's coat, his small fingers trembling. Nassima pressed herself against the wall, her lips moving in silent prayer. Rafi gripped a rusted spanner, but his hands shook too much to hold it steady.
Armin stepped forward.
The mark on his wrist burned with a cold ache, not fire this time, frost, crawling under his skin like a chain tightening. Show yourself, he said firmly. The shadow paused, then began to rise. It didn't form a full figure at first, just the outline of a man's coat, a hat tilted low, eyes like hollow circles of wet ink. The same shape he had seen in the alley, the same presence that had been one step behind them since dawn.
You carry what you shouldn't, the figure whispered.
Its voice came from the walls, from the floor, from the trembling tools on the shelves. You opened the page, and now you block the path.
Armin took another step.
He's a child, he said, his voice steady though his chest pounded.
You won't take him.
The figure's outline rippled like disturbed water.
Every name has a cost. You paid part of yours. Do you wish to pay his? Armin tightened his fist. If that's what it takes. Nassima grabbed his arm sharply.
Armin, no, this is how they trap you.
First a deal, then a chain, then you disappear.
The shadow turned slightly, as if amused.
The woman warned you. Tides always return. Samir whispered, why me? I didn't do anything.
The shadow lowered its head, the brim of its invisible hat dripping black drops onto the floor.
Because your name was spoken. That is enough.
Armin felt something stir in his chest, anger, yes, but deeper than that, a resolve he hadn't felt in years. Not since he had turned away from those first missing child posters, telling himself they weren't his problem. Now one of them stood beside him, real, shaking, waiting for someone to stand between him and the dark. He stepped closer to the figure.
You want a name? Take mine.
The shadow stilled. The workshop lights flickered violently, the ceiling fan groaning to a halt. You offer, the shadow whispered.
Again?
Armand's wrist seared, a sudden flash of pain crawling up to his elbow, the black mark glowing faintly through his sleeve. He gritted his teeth. No, he said. I don't offer a deal. I offer a fight. For a moment, there was silence, then the shadow surged forward. It didn't move like a man, it poured, it swept, a tide of cold ink rushing toward him.
Rafi dropped his spanner with a loud clang and stumbled back. Nasima screamed his name.
Armand raised his hand. The mark on his wrist flared white this time, not black, not cold, and the surge halted just inches from him, its edge writhing like a snake caught mid-strike.
The shadow hissed. You carry their memory, too strong. Armand pushed forward, his voice low. And I'll carry every single one if I have to.
The shadow recoiled, not in defeat but in retreat, slithering backward toward the open door, leaving streaks of wet blackness that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Before it left, its voice lingered one last time, then the ledger will write again.
And this time, it will not ask.
The door slammed shut. The workshop fell silent. Only the sound of Samir's shallow breathing and the soft ticking of a clock filled the room.
Rafi leaned against the wall, pale. What was that?
Armand lowered his hand slowly. The mark had faded back to black, but it pulsed, steady, alive. They won't stop, Armand said, almost to himself.
Not until the page is full. Nasima stepped forward, eyes wide. And how many pages are there?
Armand met her gaze.
As many children as they can take.
He turned to Samir, kneeling.
Listen to me. Whatever happens, you stay close. You hear me? Samir nodded, his lips trembling. I hear you.
Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had happened, buses groaning, tea sellers shouting, life carrying its usual bargains. But Armand now knew the truth, the fight had crossed the line between night and day.
It was hunting in the open.
The sun was sinking by the time they left Rafi's workshop. The sky burned orange over the canal, and the city's noises softened into an evening lull, the call of vendors, the distant hum of traffic, the murmur of television sets flickering behind narrow windows. Armand walked quickly, Samir's hand in his, Nasima following with wary eyes that scanned every shadow. They won't wait for night again, Armand muttered.
Nasima asked, where are we going now? We can't keep hiding. Armand's jaw tightened. No more hiding. I want to know where it started.
Samir looked up. Where what started? The ledger, Armand said.
The place they first wrote your name.
They cut through an old quarter of the city, where buildings leaned tiredly on each other and the roads still carried cobblestone scars beneath the thin asphalt. At the edge of a forgotten street, Armand stopped. It was there, a house with its windows boarded, its gates rusted shut. Its walls were stained with rain, and a single lantern flickered faintly above the door, though no one lived there, though the power lines above were cut.
Samir's grip tightened. I know this place.
Armand's chest went still.
You've been here? The boy nodded slowly. This is where the man told me to wait. Nasima whispered, this looks like a place the city forgot on purpose.
Armand pushed the gate. It groaned open, too easily for something that should have been locked for years. Inside, the garden was dead, weeds tall enough to brush their knees. The air smelled faintly of ash.
The mark on Armand's wrist pulsed, steady as a drumbeat. They stepped inside.
The house was hollow, furniture draped in white cloth, a long corridor leading to a staircase where the wood creaked under their weight. Dust motes danced in the air, and somewhere above, something moved, a soft dragging sound, as if a chair was being pulled slowly across a floor.
Samir whispered, this is where they made me sign. Armand's heart kicked hard. Show me. The boy led them to a room on the second floor.
The door was half open. Inside, the floor was covered in old papers, contracts, posters, names written and crossed out.
And at the center, a table. On it, an old brass lamp flickered.
The same kind of lamp that had glowed in the toy shop that night. Armin stepped closer. His fingers brushed one of the papers, a list of children's names, each marked with a small black stamp.
He recognized one. Ayan.
He closed his eyes briefly. So this is where they kept their ledger before it came to me.
Nasima whispered, "Why this house?"
Armin picked up another paper, this one older, the ink faded. At the bottom, his own signature.
Not recent.
From years ago.
His breath caught. No.
It wasn't for a child. It was a deal he had signed, a quick business sale, a piece of property he had sold on behalf of a client.
A warehouse that had burned down.
A debt that had never been paid. This house was tied to that deal. His past had opened the door. Nasima read the line beneath his old signature, ownership transferred for settlement of debt. Armin, she said slowly, you didn't just stumble into this. You built the door they walked through. He stared at the papers, his hands trembling. The mark on his wrist flared cold. I gave them the ground they planted in. Samir tugged his sleeve.
Does that mean you can close it too?
Before Armin could answer, a sound cut through the house, a low chime, like a bell struck underwater. The papers rustled though no wind passed. The lamp's flame grew taller. And from the corner of the room, a faint shape began to form, a doorway, not painted, not built, but drawn in black lines that dripped like ink.
Nasima grabbed his arm. Armin! We shouldn't be here.
But he stepped closer. If this is the door I opened, he said, voice tight, then I'll be the one to shut it.
The ink doorway pulsed once. And a hand reached out. Thin.
Pale. Child-sized. The hand that reached through the inked doorway was small, almost translucent, and trembling as though every motion hurt. Its fingers were smeared with black residue, not dirt, not ash, but the same ink that pulsed through the mark on Armin's wrist.
Nasima gasped. Armin! Don't touch it.
But he was already moving forward, slowly, his own hand trembling as he extended it.
Who are you? He whispered.
The hand gripped his wrist. Cold shot through him like a sudden winter storm. His vision blurred for a heartbeat, and in that blink, he saw not the room, not the house, but a place beyond, a dark corridor filled with faint silhouettes of children, sitting in lines, silent, their eyes glowing faintly like dying embers. One of them stood apart, taller, older, Ayan.
Armin's heart cracked open. Ayan.
The boy looked at him, not with hatred, not with blame, but with something quieter, a plea.
Then the vision broke.
The hand withdrew slightly, and in its palm was something small, a folded scrap of paper, wet with black ink. Armin took it carefully. As soon as he did, the hand retreated, the doorway flickered, and then it slammed shut with a noise like 1,000 books snapping closed. Samir clung to his side.
What was that?
Armin unfolded the paper. His name was written across the top in an uneven, childish scrawl.
Armin Malik, last debt due.
Below it, a single line, bring the ledger where it began, or the children will not cross. His throat tightened.
Where it began. Nasima's eyes widened.
The ledger isn't the book, Armin.
It's you.
It started with your deal, your signature, your hands. Armin felt the cold truth settle in his chest.
It wasn't only about retrieving the book or burning the names.
He had to undo the foundation he had laid years ago, the one that sold this property, that tied the lives of children to a debt that was never meant to be theirs.
Samir whispered, will Ayan come back if you do that?
Armin crouched before him, looking into those frightened but hopeful eyes.
I don't know.
But I think this is the first real instruction they've given us.
He looked around the room.
The papers had stopped rustling.
The lamp's flame was steady now, watching him, waiting. Nasima said, then we go back to the beginning.
Where did you sign that deal? Armin answered slowly, the old municipal archive.
They keep every contract copy there, even burned ones. Samir frowned.
That place is closed.
Nobody goes there now.
Armin looked at the boy and almost smiled.
Nobody, but us. They left the house as night fell, the streetlights buzzing faintly to life.
As they stepped out, Armin felt the mark on his wrist grow warmer, not in warning, but in recognition, as if the game had changed. Somewhere, someone now knew he had received the message. From a rooftop across the street, a shadow shifted, a man in a dark coat, speaking into a phone.
He's moving toward the archive. Send the rest.
The night thickened with rain. It came down in slow, heavy drops, turning the streets slick, making the city's lights blur. They moved quickly, through alleyways and forgotten lanes, until the old municipal building rose ahead, a gray hulk, half abandoned, its windows shuttered with iron.
Samir pressed close to Nassima as they entered the courtyard.
The place smelled of mildew and wet stone. Armin pushed the gate, it screeched, echoing in the damp night. Inside, the hallways were lined with files stacked in dusty metal cabinets, the air heavy with forgotten history. Armin whispered, "Somewhere in here is the signature that started this." As they walked deeper, the lights above flickered once, twice, and then stayed steady.
Too steady. Nassima froze. We're not alone.
A voice echoed from the far corridor, calm, polite, with a trace of mockery.
Mr. Malik. You came faster than we expected.
3 figures stepped out from the shadows, their coats long and black, their eyes reflecting faint glints like glass beads. Each wore the same symbol, the crooked key on a chain. Armin stepped forward, placing Samir behind him.
You've been feeding on debts that were never yours.
The man in front smiled thinly.
We only collect what is owed. And if I erase it? Armin asked.
The man tilted his head.
Then you must pay with something greater.
The mark on Armin's wrist flared, hot this time.
Not a warning. A countdown. Nassima whispered, Armin, what's happening?
He stared at the men, his breath coming slow and heavy. He had one chance: find the original ledger copy, tear the deal at its root, or they would claim the boy and every child like him. And as the clock ticked on his skin, one of the men stepped aside, revealing a thin black briefcase on the floor. It's already here, the man said softly.
All you have to do is sign again. Armin's heart pounded. Sign, or fight? He didn't move. Not yet.
Rain drummed softly against the old municipal building's cracked windows as the 3 men in long black coats stood in the corridor, their eyes reflecting the dim yellow light.
The briefcase lay on the ground between them and Armin, its hinges faintly glinting.
Inside it, he already knew, would not be just paper. It would be a trap dressed as salvation.
Nassima's fingers dug into his arm. Don't touch it, Armin. Samir whispered, is that the way to free them?
The man in front, tall, thin, his face pale like candle wax, smiled without warmth.
It's the only way to end their suffering. One signature, Mr. Malik. Just as you gave us before. One mark of ink, and the children walk free. Armin's jaw tightened. And the price? The man didn't blink. The ledger must balance. A debt paid is a debt claimed. He already knew what that meant. They want me in their place.
The mark on his wrist pulsed faster, the heat crawling up his veins. The paper scrap in his pocket, the one handed by that ghostly child, felt heavier, as if pressing him toward a choice. It had said, bring the ledger where it began, or the children will not cross. And this was the place. This was the beginning. But not their terms. His. Armin stepped closer, slowly, every breath steady, every word measured.
If I sign that paper, they go free? Every one of them, Ayan, these names, the boy here?
The thin man nodded once.
Their names will be erased.
Yours will remain.
And what happens to me? The man's lips twitched, almost amused.
You will take their place.
A fair trade, don't you think?
Samir gasped, clutching Armin's sleeve.
No. Don't do that. I don't want you to disappear.
Armin knelt before the boy, his eyes soft but burning with something fierce underneath.
Samir, listen to me. You didn't deserve any of this. Neither did Ayan.
I made this door open once, I have to close it.
Nassima's voice cracked. Armin, think. There has to be another way.
The three men stood silent, patient, as though they already knew how this would end. Armin reached for the briefcase, then stopped. Because the mark on his wrist didn't burn now. It cooled. He understood. It wasn't asking for him to submit. It was asking for him to claim what was his, the truth of the debt, the root of the chain. He straightened. I won't sign your paper. The man's pale eyes narrowed. Then they will rot. Armin took the scrap from his pocket, held it up. This isn't your ledger. This is mine. And this place, this building, it belongs to the city. The original contract was signed here. I'm here to void it, not feed it. The men shifted uneasily. He stepped back toward the central archive hall, the one place where all copies of signed contracts were kept under heavy seals. Behind the rusted doors lay 1,000 deals, thousands of debts. He pushed them open, and the hall inside stirred, as if the air itself remembered his name. Drawers opened on their own. A single folder slid free. Armin caught it. It was brittle with age, its seal half broken. His signature scrawled across the bottom, young and eager, unaware what it would lead to. This is the key, he whispered. The men began to move, shadows lengthening, their patience cracking. Stop, one hissed. You tear that, and you tear yourself apart. Armin held the folder over a lantern flame. If that's the cost, so be it. The paper curled, blackened, and as it burned, the mark on his wrist flared like a dying star. Heat surged through him, but it was not pain, it was release. The building trembled. Somewhere deep within, a door slammed open, and a faint chorus of children's voices echoed, fading into rain. Samir cried out, clutching his chest. They're leaving. I can feel them. The three men stumbled back, their forms flickering like smoke and wind. One snarled, You fool! Do you know what you've invited? Armin threw the burning folder onto the cracked tiles. Freedom! The mark on his wrist began to fade, not vanish, but change, the ink spreading up his arm into thin threads that wrapped his palm like vines. He had undone the chain. But something else had come through. From the far end of the hall, a shadow began to rise tall, immense, with countless eyes glowing faintly within. The men fled. Nassima grabbed his hand. Armin, what is that? He stared at the shifting form, feeling the cold weight of his choice settle in his chest. That is the debt collector. And it's coming for me. Samir's voice shook. Can we run? Armin didn't answer. Not yet. The hall shuddered as the shadow rose higher, its outline spreading across the cracked walls, swallowing the pale glow of the flickering lights. Rain dripped from the broken ceiling as if the sky itself leaned in to watch. The three men who had brought the briefcase were gone, their black coats abandoned, their whispers trailing into the night like torn pages. But the thing they served, it stayed. Eyes dozens, then hundreds, blinked within the mass of shifting darkness. A faint chorus of voices echoed within it, fragments of forgotten names. The smell of burnt paper and wet earth filled the room. Samir clung to Armin's side. It's looking at you. Armin's voice was steady, though his hands trembled. It's not looking, Samir. It's weighing. The mark on his wrist flared again, not burning now, but pulsing in rhythm with the shadow's slow steps. He understood then, this was not just a creature. It was the ledger itself, walking, gathering, demanding. Nassima whispered, We can still run. Armin shook his head. If we run, it follows. If I fall, it stops. He stepped forward, leaving them behind. Armin! Nassima cried, but her voice cracked in the vast hall. The shadow paused as he approached, its countless eyes narrowing. A voice rose from within, deep as a closing vault, sign, or be signed. Armin lifted his marked hand. I already signed once. And I burned that chain. So now you listen. He thought of Ayan. He thought of every name on those blackened pages. And he thought of Samir, still breathing, still waiting to live a life beyond this night. You fed on a debt that was never theirs, he said, his voice echoing.
So take it from the one who owes it.
The shadow swelled, as if amused.
You offer yourself?
Armin closed his eyes.
Not as payment.
As closure. From his pocket, he pulled the final scrap of paper, the one the child's hand had given him. He pressed it to the mark on his wrist. The ink threads flared, climbing his arm, wrapping his chest like roots. Pain lanced through him, but beneath it was something like peace, a door opening, but this time inward.
The shadow hissed.
The hall trembled.
The rain outside roared louder.
And one by one, the faint figures of children began to appear along the corridor walls, pale, waiting, watching. Ion stood among them, eyes wide, his small hand reaching out.
Go, Armin whispered. A gust of cold wind swept through the hall.
The children's forms shimmered, then dissolved like morning mist.
Samir felt the air lighten, the pressure in his chest ease.
They're free, he whispered. The shadow reeled back, its countless eyes flaring, not in triumph, but in loss. Its voice cracked like breaking glass, you close one door, you open another. And then, with a final shudder, it collapsed into itself, leaving only the smell of smoke and a circle of ash where it had stood. When the dust settled, Armin was on his knees.
The mark was gone.
So was the paper. Nasima and Samir ran to him. He was breathing, shallow, but there.
Armin.
Samir grabbed his hand.
You didn't disappear.
He smiled faintly, his face pale.
No.
But something else stayed behind.
What do you mean?
Nasima asked, her eyes wet. He looked at the circle of ash. A faint shape lingered there, a key, crooked and thin, carved into the floor. They'll come again, he said quietly.
Not here. Not for them.
But somewhere else.
Death always finds a door.
Samir hugged him, burying his face against his chest.
Then you'll stop them again.
Armin stroked the boy's hair.
If I can. If not me, someone who remembers this.
Outside, the rain began to fade. The city lights flickered back to life. The hall was silent now, no whispers, no marks, just 3 people standing where a cycle had ended.
For tonight.
Weeks later, the city moved on.
The old municipal building was sealed, marked for demolition. Samir went back to school. Nasima began to laugh again, though sometimes she stared at shadows too long. And Armin?
He carried no mark now, but every time it rained, his arm ached faintly, as if ink still flowed beneath the skin, waiting. The moral of the story whispered through their lives. A debt can be paid with gold, or years, or even blood, but the only true closure is when someone chooses to carry the weight that never belonged to the innocent.